Hello and a very warm welcome to the program. I am Imonia Marire. Politics and its associated activities are thick in the air. Not that they are in short supply anytime in Nigeria though, but has become routine since 1999. Anytime a general election is approaching, the attention of Nigerians is refocused on reforming the electoral system. Yet, after each reform process, we immediately find inherent faults and seek further and better amendments. So, it is this time around, with the 2027 polls fast approaching. In a consequential move, the National Assembly has introduced proposed amendments to the Electoral Act 2022 that will shift the date of the next presidential and governorship elections from the traditionally scheduled February 2027 to November 2026. The proposal is anchored on the draft bill's provision that elections for the offices of president and governor shall be held not later than 185 days before the expiration of the term of office of the last holder of the office. Since the tenure of the current incumbents ends on 29th May 2027, applying this 185-day rule will place the election date around November 2026. The legislators justify the shift on the grounds of ensuring that all election-related litigation and petitions are disposed of before new office holders take their seats. Now, according to the chairman of the House Committee on Electoral Matters, Adebayo Balogun, the draft bill proposes reducing tribunal judgments to 90 days and appellate or Supreme Court decisions to no more than 60 days, thereby wrapping up all disputes within the 185-day safe window. And furthermore, the reform package reaches beyond dates. It also includes measures such as mandatory electronic transmission of election results, early voting provisions for selected categories such as security personnel, election officials, and journalists like myself, and structural constitutional adjustments to transfer election timing rules from the Constitution into the Electoral Act for greater agility. Yet, the proposal has elicited concern from some quarters. Some have rejected the idea of moving the elections forward, warning that doing so risks dragging governance into a perpetual campaign mode and shortening the effective period of an administration to mere months rather than years. Now, as Nigeria stands at the crossroads of electoral reform, the initiative underscores an ambition to reshape not just the timing of elections, but the rhythm of democracy itself. With the changes strengthen the credibility and efficiency of the electoral process, or introduce new risks of politicization and governance shortfalls. Has the 2022 Electoral Act been sufficiently tested and tried after just one general election cycle to determine its frailties and strengths? So, as the bill moves through committees, floor debate, constitutional amendment requirements, and eventual implementation, a journey that could redefine the next chapter of Nigeria's democratic evolution, we shall take a critical look at all the angles and the road ahead of the new Inec helmsman, Professor Joash Amupitan. These are the issues we will be looking at on the program today, right after this timeout. Stay with us.
We need is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria, which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, Politics, and Power on AIT.
Okay, let's get to meet our guest analyst. Joining us virtually from Lagos is Professor Adele Jinodu, a political scientist, a policy scholar, and a scholar who specializes in elections. But he is also a public administrator and a former commissioner in the National Election Commission, which of course became or transformed into the Independent National Electoral Commission of today. Professor Adele Jinodu is joining us from Lagos. Thank you, Prof, for finding time to join us. Prof, you need to unmute so that we can hear you here. All right, while Prof is trying to unmute his microphone
Can you hear me now?
here in the studio. Yes, Prof, we can hear you now. We can hear you. Great.
I said congratulations, Dr. Imoni.
Thank you so much, Prof. It's good to have you again.
It's my pleasure.
Welcome. We're also joined right here in the studio by Mr. Celestine Okudili Odo. He is head of programs at Action Aid Nigeria and a member of Action Aid's Independent Judicial Accountability Project, otherwise known as IJAP. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
We also expect to join us very shortly by Professor Abubakar Umar Kari. Professor Kari is a political sociologist and teaches at the University of Abuja here in the nation's capital. He's an expert in political behavior and democratic governance. Professor Kari will also be joining us virtually. Thank you so much. Right, so let's begin this way, Professor Adele Jinodu. The new Inec chairman was given approval by the Senate last week, Thursday, and now we know that he is going to be piloting the affairs of the Electoral Commission at least for the next 5 years. Let's begin with that. What do you think is the major task ahead of him at the moment?
Thank you, Imoni. Let me begin by congratulating the new INEC chair. He has a tough job ahead of him. And the top job, as I see it, is not a matter of whether INEC is independent or not. It is about the environment within which INEC has to carry out its statutory functions. And that environment is a terrible, very, very difficult one. And I think those of us who are observers, we have a duty, a national duty, to focus less on INEC and more on how we can reform and reshape that political environment. To take just one example, 1.5 years to the next set of general elections, the National Assembly is now coming up with legislation to, in fact, almost offset the old electoral framework that we have. Instead of saying what we have now, how best can we use it? You see, I think we have a sense that what I call the magic of legislation. If there is a problem, maybe the problem is with legislation. So let us amend the legislation. Let us improve the legislation. But if you keep asking the question, since 1999, every National Assembly session has been preoccupied with electoral reform, spending the whole 4 years of their life trying to amend trying to just electoral law. So the question we should ask is, if in spite of all these electoral reforms, electoral law, electoral act that we've been passing since 1999, if things have not improved better, INEC has tried to reform itself, what is the problem? And I think, so the problem, therefore, for me, is with the environment within which INEC is situated. And that environment is sort of politics, where the real environment within which you can carry out free and credible elections is virtually impossible. The political parties are not democratic. They have an anti-democratic culture. They set out to sabotage the electoral process for their own ends. So no matter what you do, so that problem is still there. And if you look at our history, this is not something new. The Electoral Reform Committee in 2007 looks at the history of electoral elections in Nigeria since 1918 or thereabouts. And they say each election has been degenerating. Now we've had some improvement, and now we are now saying it is degenerating. So the question is not, we know that the elections are degenerating, but why is it degenerating? And I think that question for me is in the character of our politics, where people, governments, ruling parties try to use the electoral process for their own partisan political advantage, and where the rest of us just sit back as if we are not concerned. So for me, the major task ahead of him is the political environment in which Inec is situated. No matter how much you legislate it, you have to legislate, you have to do something about the electoral environment. So that is what can we do to make the electoral environment better. And the Electoral Reform Committee put forward a proposal in its report, recommendations about how we can do that. Now, since 2007-8, we've gone to sleep. Now somebody is waking up. Let us have all election cases finished before. That was suggested as far back as 2008. What have they been looking at? Unbundle Inec. What have they done about it? Create an electoral offences commission. Nothing about it. Create, an electoral party registration and commission. Nothing has been done about it. And all we are concerned with the CSOs, all of us, is let us pass more law. Let us pass more law. Let us pass more law. So you spend 4 years trying to pass law, and those who are passing the law are the ones who are going to sabotage the law. They are the ones who are going to make life difficult for those who want a free and fair election. So they have a conflict of interest. So we should divert our attention from there's been a lot of over legislation. Let us now look at the process. Let's look at the environment. What can be done about? How can we reform our political parties? How can we make our people civic citizens? How can we address issues of poverty, which makes people vulnerable to vote buying? What are we doing about the irresponsibility of the political parties? For example, the last elections, a lot of money came in from outside. What about election financing? What are they about election? A lot of money came from outside against the law. And we have, during party primaries, people spending foreign currencies to buy votes. What are the FCC doing? What are the police doing? And it is these same politicians who are making laws against this that are doing this, violating it in our presence. So I do not envy the new chairman of Inec. I do not envy him. So I think the important thing is, let us shift our focus away from the law. Every time we are amending the left, and we are amending the law, and things are getting worse. So the question to raise is, why are things getting worse?
Okay.
And that is the analysis that we need to start getting. It's not just because the INEC is not independent, or because the INEC is appointed by the president. No, there is something outside there that is making it. For example, it's not just elections that we don't be able to have unproblematic elections. Take the population census. Since 1960, we have not been able to hold a correct, controversy-free population council, and it is again because it is politicized. And every year, censuses are cancelled. You spend money on it. You dissolve it. You create a new national population council. But people don't ask the reason. Why is it that we cannot count ourselves in this country? And why is that a problem?
So many questions to seek answers to, Prof. But let me bring in Celestine at this point in time. Celestine, it's become very routine. Every 4 years, as we approach another election cycle, we must hear calls for an agitation for electoral reforms. And like Prof said, we have had so many reforms that even the ones that were reformed the last time, we have not tried them out.
Yeah.
We are seeking more reforms.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe, yeah, I think Prof has a very good point, and looking at the agency of the law, because it's not just about laws and laws, but about also the implementation of the laws, the supervision, the monitoring aspect of it. I think that's where we are failing largely, and that's also brings us the role of human agency in the conduct of the election. So we are looking at the internal, which is within the commission itself, but we are looking at the external. External here is the political behavior, the conduct of the political parties, and also the conduct of we, the citizens, with regards to the electioneering process. So I don't think there's capacity with INEC in terms of conducting an election. But the challenge is the circumvention, the role of human agency, which has largely, it played out very well in 2023 general election. But before the new INEC chairman is a whole lot of, expectation. The critical point of it is on logistics. Logistics is at the heart of election. Logistics conservatively constitute more than 70% of the electoral cycle. And what it means is that he needs to sit down and think and rethink about the logistic planning, think about the procurement, think about the delivery, the storage, and lastly, the retrieval, which he mentioned during the screening as also a major challenge before INEC. So looking at this cycle means that he has a whole lot to do. Recall, as Action Aid, leading to 2023 general election, we sat down with INEC, including the former chairman, Yakubu. We were there in Lagos for a week, developing a framework that will guide the logistic for that 2023 general election. Unfortunately, we all saw what happened. So that's the major work ahead of him, and he must have to deliver on that before we can think of anything free, fair election coming up 2027.
Again, we come back to the whole external environment of the INEC and the elections itself. You just talked about having to design what looked like a foolproof logistics arrangement for the 2023 elections.
Yeah.
But of course, there were extenuating circumstances that probably affected those logistics arrangements. Mainly because INEC does not control most of those external logistics infrastructure, as it were.
Yeah.
So, moving forward, what do you think that this new chairman will need to do to resolve that kind of
I
challenge?
think the first step he needs to do is auditing the system, auditing that logistic process. What has worked well and what have not really functioned well, and what are those impediments that hinder delivery. Look at every election we talked about delivering materials to centers. Some of the centers, you see some center not starting election till 12 noon or 1 p.m. just because materials have not arrived. And consistently, election after election, this has been reoccurring. Doesn't mean we don't have a solution to it. It has a solution. And what we did during that logistic framework planning, we had to bring in the Transport Workers Union. They brought in the Transport Workers Union, the marine, and all those that had to do with that logistic component. And it's surprisingly to hear that even many of them don't even know about what the contract says or what it contained. So they just get instruction maybe a day or before to say, you deliver this to that. So that is not a good process. A good process that within at least 6 months to the time, all these logistic components, they should be in tune and taking several lessons or teaching or mentoring on how this and that should be done. That should be factored in, and it's very, very important.
All right, Prof, let me bring you back to this whole effort at amending the Electoral Act 2022. Now, some have argued that, look, the changes that were made in the Act in 2022 have not been sufficiently tried and tested. So why do we need another amendment or alteration of the Electoral Act just after one election cycle? That's on one hand. But of course, we know now that the National Assembly is saying, look, one of the major alterations or amendments that should take place in this Electoral Act is for us to shift the elections from February 2027 to November 2026. Now, so what could be the justifying or moving arguments behind that kind of thinking?
Well, I think basically, I mean, I don't know what the thinking behind all of this is, but it is too close to the elections to start thinking of that now. Because you have to roll out a new election project plan by the Inec. So, but the important point for me is that if the Supreme Court itself, if the judiciary itself, that's within the time frame, the elections, all election cases should be able to be finished before the president is sworn in, or the senators, members of the assembly are sworn in, or the governors are sworn in. So it is simply the abuse of that judicial process that is causing all of this. If you bring the election backwards to November next year, or whenever you want to bring back to, the same loophole in the law will be exploited to prolong and prolong and prolong. So I think the important is if the political will is there, and if the political environment, for me, this is just another attempt to befuddle the whole process and create more and more problems for the INEC and for the country, as because of the elections. There is no reason why elections cases cannot be concluded before the president is sworn in, or the governor is sworn in, or the member of the house are sworn in. It is done in other countries. Within 1 or 2 months after presidential elections, their cases, they go to court. But we have over-judicialized the process here. The whole thing is, and it is because the process leading to the selection of candidates is that process is again modeled up. Party primaries, the appeals to primary, pre-election cases, post-election cases, post-election cases. So I think the important thing, once you, and I don't say you can sanitize that environment, really. And if we continue like this, there's going to be a point where there'll be a breakdown. Because the real problem for me is the political behavior of our political leaders and our political parties. They are the ones who keep on trying to sabotage and muddy the process, which they themselves are supposed to benefit from. So I think, for me, whether you bring it forward or bring it back, the important thing is like what leads up to that process? What leads up to the process that resulted in the outcome? And if that process is tainted, see, the important thing about elections, really, in democratic theory, is that there must be, more or less, there must be procedural certainty, and then you have uncertainty of outcomes. Now, when you have, and this is part of our political history since the early 50s, every ruling party, every government elections that we've conducted from 51 up till last year, every ruling party has tried to use the power of incumbency to benefit in a partisan manner. That is why we have all these logistic problems. Why is it that if the civil service, public service, is insulated from politics, why is it not that government vehicles can be used to transport. You don't have to rely on transport workers. In India, for example, 6 months before the elections, the Indian Electoral Commission takes control of even the civil service in terms of disposition for election, and people do this thing voluntarily. But here, elections becoming money. So for logistic reasons, you have not paid us, we are not going to move this. You get the transport workers union, who are also political arms of the government in power in most of our, oh, sorry, we woke up this morning, the battery is not working, give us more money to go and buy batteries. Or the tire has gone down. These are man-made logistic problems because people want to make money out of this process. And those are the issues we should address.
Okay. All right. So Celestine,
Yeah.
the proposed change.
Yeah.
It talks about having to conclude all election petitions and litigations before swearing in.
6 months
I
ahead.
know that this was also one of the recommendations made by IJAB way back since 2024,
Yeah.
when IJAB started sitting. So the timelines to determine the litigations and the petitions now encroaches on when swearing in should take place. But everyone appear to agree that litigations must end before swearing in. But that timeline is a problematic one.
It's a problematic. The new timeline of bringing it to November, I think it has a whole lot of challenges. If actually that is meant to solve that problem, there are a whole lot of recommendation on ground already, but going beyond that is for us also as a country to learn what is happening in other countries. Recall, with Delay to Dinga now, after his election then, it took only 2 weeks to finish up all matters before he was sworn in. 2 weeks, that's Kenya. So have we actually taken time to understudy their own process and what made it possible, to do that just within 2 weeks so that there is time, then it doesn't encroach into the swearing in. Of course, like the AJA proposed, all matters, all litigation, all matters should be finished before the candidate is sworn in. And going by this proposal, what it means is that we will have a whole set of off-cycle elections that are going to be triggered off if we are going by this proposal. But going beyond that is also the cost element, cost associated with it. The new Inec chairman will just be coming in. He will need time to settle down, understudy, what he met on ground. And he promised during the screening at the National Assembly, that he would take time to audit and even understand what that glitch means, what's caused it and all that, So he will need time to do. I think for us is about getting the system work well, getting the system to deliver the kind of electoral outcome, that people will be happy with, political party would be happy with. And what that also does is that it will limit, or rather reduce, a series of litigations. And recall also, part of the causes of this chain of litigation is the lacking internal democracy within political parties. The lacking internal democracy within political parties. If there's a way, which I know there is, of ensuring that political parties follow their constitution, follow their guidelines, follow their regulations in terms of their primaries, definitely the chances or the number of cases will definitely reduce.
You just made allusion to what happened in Kenya. And in fact, up to the last election, this happened, that within 2 weeks or thereabout, election litigations had been disposed of before swearing in.
Yeah.
But recall that in Kenya, it is possibly just one stage in the constitutional court. But it's different here, where you move from the election tribunal to the Court of Appeal and to the Supreme Court. All of that is what
delays the process. Yes, and that is why our recommendation in terms of starting from tribunal, you go to appeal court for the governorship, you end it there. You know, that of presidential, you start from the Court of Appeal and end it at the Supreme Court.
2 stages.
2 stages by each of them. So if such recommendations are to be adopted, you know, into the new act, definitely it will allow time. And what that also means is that it reduces the cost of the spending taxpayers' money. How much was spent to conduct the 2023 general election, the request, and eventually, and all that? We are talking billions of naira, taxpayers' money. And then the money spent by political parties and all that in terms of litigation is also chasing that actual cost spent on the election. So this is very, very important. And we pray and continue to pray that these recommendations are adopted into the proposed Amendment Act, even though what we are seeing is likely that it may have 3 instead of 2, but we pray that 2 stages we propose are adopted.
Prof, is it possible, from your own experience, that pre-election matters can actually be disposed of even before the election itself? And then, after the election, given the stages of litigation from tribunal to Court of Appeal, from Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court, in almost all the cases, whether presidential or it's only the presidential that actually has 2 stages, from Court of Appeal, which is the tribunal of first instance, and then ending up at the Supreme Court. But for governorship, for instance, you go from the tribunal to the Court of Appeal, and from Court of Appeal, you end up at the Supreme Court. Even pre-election matters get as far as to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
That long process. Now, so the proposed changes, how would this affect INEC's operational timeline, especially in relation to voter registration, party primaries, litigations, and procurement processes?
Election plan ahead of time, maybe a year, 2 years ahead of time. But what complicates the matter would be this party primary thing, you know. And you know, there was a time when, in fact, there was legislation to the effect that INEC should have the final say in terms of, you know, validating candidates. Then the law was changed, and then it now became the courts. You know, and that's why you have this delay that comes in, because in terms of our own judicial process here, there is too much emphasis placed on what they call the due process, and that due process can take a long time. You know, and they've tried to collapse the time for hearing, but it is not within the time frame. It is usually after, you know, even for presidential election, for example. Now, under the present arrangement, it cannot be that process cannot be concluded before the president is sworn in. So, and as far back as 2007, 2008, the Electoral Reform Committee had suggested that all election cases must end before the president is sworn in. They must end. All election cases for government must end. But as I said, nothing has been done since then, because the political will to do it is not there.
Yeah.
And you know, the late Justice Uwais said explained that the reason why elections tend to be so long in terms of being is because of this due process thing. Give them the chance to talk, but these are special situations where you need to act expeditiously and decide the issue. It means coming to give reasons for your judgment later, but you can at least go ahead and finish the case before the elections. And most presidential systems, I think, ours might be the only one. This sort of issue will not arise where you have a parliamentary system. you know, and so it is in between the presidential system. But the issue is that let it be finished before let the case be finished, and it can be done if there is the political will within the judiciary and the political parties themselves. If they have that political, but I don't see that political will exist in either level, because a lot depends on what the parties bring or what litigants bring to the table and the time frame that they have now to do it. You remember that before, as you rightly said, governorship elections stop at the
The Court of Appeal.
Court of Appeal.
Yes.
But then from nowhere there were pressures because of what was going on to make it go up to the Supreme Court. So I think the important thing is for us to mount pressure. You don't have to amend the law before elections can be, even if there is provision that elections must be cases must be adjudged by within a time. The court system can decide to do so before that time has expired. So I think it's important. But
there are those, Prof, who argue, for instance, that the judicial timeline we compress justice at the end of the day if too much pressure is put on that timeline. That if you insist that election litigations and petitions must be concluded within this period of time, in the end, justice may not be served for those who are involved.
Yeah, but the issue is, in case of national priority, this is very, very important, because this is making a decision on who is going to rule us. So if it can be done within a month or two of the and then that'll be the end of it. But when you prolong it and all these stages go on and on and on and on, people abuse that whole process. And there's no reason, as people have said, where this cannot be done at the level of to some at the Court of Appeal for governorship cases. Of course, another option would be, in fact, to decentralize elections, as they do in say United States, for example. Let states conduct both federal and state elections in their states. You decentralize it, and those ones can be adjudged there, and then the national one come to the national level. But as I said, for me, the important thing is that the political environment is what is the most problematic. Because as you also know, part of the problem of the judiciary now is also the suspicion that the ruling party has a way of compromising the judiciary. They have a way of compromising the security service, of compromising, and so on and so forth. So I think the important thing is for us to now stand, how do we stop this abuse of the use of political power? And I think, it is, we need to go back and see how it has been done in other countries. Let me give you one example. Take election day, for example. I know of places, Ghana, for example, Sierra Leone, for example, where on election day, citizen groups, non-partisan citizens groups, monitor election, voting, make sure that there is no katakata, and if there's going to be, they intervene in terms of, say, look, don't do that. But here people sit back, they see these things being done, they laugh over it, So I think it's important to have this what I call this night watchman approach to election monitoring, whereby the civil society organizations should spend more of their time organizing citizen watch groups that will make sure that party primaries are conducted the way they should be conducted, mounting pressure, and on election day also making sure that polling units are what they should be, sacrosanct, where people go in, cast their vote, and go away, and there is nobody trying to buy votes or to sell votes. It can be done.
Ajap did recommend earlier that, look, the timeline should be reduced from 185 days to 120 days.
20 days.
Yes. Now, crunching such timeline, as it were, and ensuring that litigations are disposed of before swearing in. Wouldn't that also mean the same thing as what the legislators in National Assembly are doing now by asking that these election timelines be moved backwards?
No. The difference here is bringing backwards the general election from February 2027 back to November 2026. This is the difference.
Okay.
So if let's assume this process such starts after this general election in terms of giving the timeline. But I think there's a solution to it, just like I said. Prof mentioned there's national priority. If we consider it a national priority, then we use the timeline to deliver. But beyond that is also looking at the new proposal in terms of, is it possible to have special election tribunal? Part of the request. Is it possible to have this? So if answer is yes, so this body will
Constitutional courts.
Your constitutional court will now solely be focused on this and deliver it within a very short time. I think these things last in the court for long because there are many cases to attend to. And I don't think priorities are given to this. So if such is there, then it will be delivered. And the justice will still be assured.
Okay, yeah. So, for instance, if the elections hold in February, as it has always been, within that period between February and May 29,
yes,
the 120 days, it can be accommodated within those 120
we can still
days.
Determine it.
Yes.
Then bringing back election. Yeah, if you are bringing back this, it has a ripple effect. It has negative effect. One, the time for political parties also, in terms of their primaries and all that, and allowing time. Okay, so we also need time for the citizen participation in the process, just like we are raising with regards to the screening of the new Inec chairman in terms of the citizen component of the citizens are not involved. So we expected a kind of space whereby citizens will also have opportunity to interrogate. Let it be a public hearing at the National Assembly, So create space for asking. A major gap is not allowing citizens to be part of this process. And we are talking about election, we are talking about leadership, and citizens should be and must be part of it.
Prof, again, this also raises issues of governance issues, the implications for governance. Some people have argued that, look, if you move it to November 2026, for instance, it will mean that politics will kick in almost immediately and governance is likely to suffer.
Our elections have campaigns have started 2.5 years before the elections. So, but again, that also tells us a lot about the environment in which these things take place. There is a law. People have found a way of going around the law. Oh, I am not a candidate until I have won my party's nomination. But the spirit is there, not just, so you see, this whole question of looking for loopholes, looking for ambiguities in the law, and to abuse it. If people keep to the spirit of the law, they don't have to tell them that, look, do business. Go through the streets of Lagos now, you already see the posters of one particular candidate everywhere. Elections have started. All these people are already using public funds, procurement, to prepare for the elections. Starting projects, procurements, which are essentially ways of, right from the 50s, governments have used that as a way of building war chests for elections. So elections have started. You cannot help it. So I think the important thing is, I think we need to let the politicians know they keep on dictating public debates on electoral reform. Let us have our own forum where we'll tell them and force them, and there are ways within the constitution of making them listen to you. It is because we have not, and it's there, there are too many hands in the in the electoral process in our country, and it's unfortunate because elections, apart from mobilizing for war, they are the next. There is the next event that involves mobilization of the entire country within a period of 2 or 3 weeks before election and after election. I mean, in terms of mobilization of resources and of human people, it is the largest mobilizational effort that involves Nigerians generally. And so it is important. But I think the politicians, the National Assembly, should just forget about this and see how what we have, how we can make the best use of it already. And then they can start looking, and this whole idea that if the National Assembly does not finish it with something, then the new one comes and start afresh. We need to go beyond that. And that let INEC itself make the constitutional provision for INEC. Let all matters relating to the election be left with the INEC in terms of formulating regulations and rules. And exceptional only in cases where constitutional issues are involved or there are serious issues that need, like constituency delimitation, that needs action. But let INEC do its work.
Yeah.
And Nigeria must be the only country where I know that there is so much involvement with what INEC does at the national, at the National Assembly level, at all kinds of places. Everybody putting their hands into INEC, muddying the waters. And it is getting so bad now that, even the choice of an INEC chairman, it has become politicized in terms of it is the turn of this region, it is the turn of that region, when Constitution already provides for geopolitical zones representation. So my point is that we have over-legislated elections. There's too much over-legislation. And because of the over-legislation, there's also over-judicialization of that process. And I think we need to look at our electoral jurisprudence and look at our, electoral laws as well. But this is understandable because electoral governance involves at least 3 levels. Rulemaking, which normally should lie with the National Assembly, and they have their own of doing it. Rule application will lie with INEC and other people, and rule adjudication. So these are 3 interlinked processes which need to be separated. So in terms of rule application, rule making, let's find a way in which we will remove the provenance of the National Assembly, made up of politicians who have interest in the electoral process, and then find a way of making INEC as far as make rules and regulations that it will then apply and enforce.
And those regulations become justiciable even at the Supreme Court level.
Yeah, at the rule adjudication level.
Okay. So Celestine, given the amount of time we have left, beyond the change in dates, which is being suggested by the National Assembly, what are the other very salient aspects of the Electoral Act that you think ought to be given some little touch or some nudging before the next election?
Okay, thank you very much. I think when you talk about this, there are a whole lot, There's one recommendation we made, which is that INEC should not be drawn in as a party in cases. It should not, because that also places the whole body
electoral petitions,
and makes INEC vulnerable. So that also should be really something, if they can pick it and and get it into the act. That would
Because
be very
for
good.
every petition,
For
INEC
every
is a party.
petition, INEC is a party. Every petition, INEC is a party. I think INEC should only be called to tender or provide evidence where necessary, but not to be a substantial party to all the litigation. That shouldn't be there. And there's so much pressure. I think there's so much pressure on INEC. And also, is it possible the unbundling of INEC? And unbundling of INEC, I think there's a step already with the proposition, the bill for political party regulatory commission and all that. So that would also reduces remove that responsibility on INEC. But such body should also be entrusted, with the regulation of a political party, ensuring that political parties were regulated, and at the same time, the civic education component, which is largely lacking, and is an area that we are not really focusing much. And it is and should be a major area of focus of INEC. Civil society, across the country and beyond, we've been playing this role in terms of bridging that gap. We were in Ghana last year to observe their general election. I tell you, it was a festival. It was a festival in the sense that people were happy out in the street. Every person understands the process,
Because the political parties play their
major role in
mobilizers.
terms of mobilizing, in terms of educating, not just coercing and extorting the citizens in terms of, but they have that role. It was and party agents, do you know what? Each party agents understand what the process is all about. And they had to go through, verify all the processes, So the agents are not just, you pick this and it is a process that builds up. And citizens understand, everybody understands. So that's unbundling of INEC, and they make that specific function very, very effective. That will help.
Okay. All right. So let's leave it at that. That's our program for today. We want to thank Professor Adele Jinodu, who joined us all the way from Lagos virtually. Professor Jinodu is a political scientist, policy scholar, specialist in election and federalism, a public administrator and former commissioner in the National Election Commission, which eventually became INEC. Professor, thank you so much for your time. Always there when we call.
Ahead of you.
Thank
Enjoy
you so
yourself.
much. Thank you. And right here in the studio, we had Mr. Celestine Okudili Odo, who is the head of programs at Action Aid Nigeria, and is a member of Action Aid Nigeria's Independent Judicial Accountability Project, IJAP. Thank you so
very
much for your time.
Yeah, thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
Well, that's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.